All right, good morning. My name is Tashana Johnson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the program managers with the Whole U, the Wellbeing and Engagement team that serves all of UW faculty, staff, and some students as well. I have the pleasure of being in company today with Dr. Suzanne Kolar-Jeffrey, who will get us started in just a moment. I'm going to let you know that as we talk about dental health and as we go through today's session, you are welcome to ask questions. Please feel free to drop them into the chat. We'll make it a little bit interactive, and I will pause Dr. Jeffrey as needed in order to get those questions answered. Thanks so much for being here. And Suzanne, please take it away.
Hi. So thank you so much for joining us at 11, right before lunch on a Friday when you could maybe be off work. So my name is Suzanne Kolar-Jeffrey. I'm a Swedish trained dentist, and I had a lot of preventive care during my studies. I was so fascinated by studying, so I also went for a PhD in immunobiology. I work at the UW School of Dentistry as a clinical assistant professor. I work with the students. I'm also part of faculty practice, and I also run a geriatric clinic together with the community up at Lehigh Health in in Linwood. And so I work with saliva all the time. But if I said that I was going to talk about saliva, I thought no one would be interested. So it sounded more interesting to say like spit. Kind of stopped you thinking, like, what does she mean? So I was asking the people around me in the department what they were thinking about when they heard saliva. And someone said it was something that was mouth-watering. They were thinking about eating, a drooling dog, spit. And of course, my coworkers, they were saying, okay, root surface caries. Could it be resting stimulated saliva? Can we diagnose it? How can I stimulate saliva? Or I was thinking, is there any way I could manipulate secretion in my patients that don't have much of their own? So I'm going to talk about the value of a good spit. And saliva, maybe all you didn't know. You might not know that we can do saliva testing in the clinic, and I do that all the time. You might not have been to a dentist that analyzes your saliva like chairside, but I do that. And as you're sitting right now, you have probably a resting saliva in, and of course my phone rings right now. You have probably resting saliva in your mouth. You are just relaxed, and it's just the mucosal hydration and a little bit of saliva that's coming out. But when you eat, and when you see this juicy piece of meat, you have this stimulated saliva. And those have very different qualities. So when you're young, active, you produce a lot of saliva. As you age and you start to take medications, then the quality and the amount of saliva decreases. So you might not be realizing the value of your saliva until it's starting to be less. So what do you find in saliva? Well, you have a lot of immunity. You have the innate immune system. You also have some of the specific immune system with immunoglobulins. We have starting to take liquid biopsies for non-small cell lung cancer, for example. Liquid biopsies in saliva has been a long journey, and UCLA is at the forefront. The problem has been to stabilize saliva so it doesn't break down the DNA of the tumor cells. So saliva is important for protecting our oral tissues, the mucosa, for example, with growth factors, so it heals itself. And I will be talking a lot about the buffering, the pH of saliva and the buffering, and then the relationship that has to your teeth and to potential erosion, abrasion, attrition, and cavities. So you might be scared to know that only 70% of the genome, of the DNA and RNA that you find in saliva is from you. 30% is from bacteria. So we have a lot of bacteria in the mouth, and it's important that our saliva is steadily flowing so we can swallow down those bacteria, and so they don't overgrow. And that's why it is so important that you also stay hydrated. Okay, now it's acting up here on me. So if you look at the proteins that we have in saliva that are from you, there are over 2,000 proteins. And the different types of salivary glands that we have, they secrete different proteins. 27% of the proteins that you find in saliva are also identical to the ones you find in blood or in plasma. So not all of them are transferred over. I mentioned just liquid biopsies, and it's circulating tumor DNA that can be detected in the blood, in saliva, and in any of the liquids that we have. This is news right now, like 6 hours ago, actually, right before we started. In the UK, they will be sending home at-home blood tests that can detect up to 50 different cancers this summer. And at UCLA, under the head of Professor David Wong, they are at the head of the saliva liquid biopsy. So the biofluids that you can use to detect any cancer, or you can use for biomarker discovery, is mostly blood and saliva, but you could use urine tears or CSF. The most beneficial with saliva is that it's non-invasive. You can use spit. For blood, you need to probably like prick your finger or go in to take a blood draw, and it's more invasive. So we want saliva, or the saliva test, to be much more available, but the problem is to store them and to have a collection vial, so everything is more reproducible. So I wanted to start to talk about the different salivary glands that we have, because we actually have a lot of them. There are some that are major, and the one that's called PG here is the parotid gland. It is the one that is active, mostly active when you are chewing and you are eating. It produces a lot of saliva with a lot of digestive enzymes. Then you also have the submandibular and the sublingual glands. They are located more at the floor of the mouth, and they are creating a more slimy saliva that is active right now when you are just sitting here and listening to me. You also have minor salivary glands, and they are spread like throughout the oral cavity. In the hard palate, here marked yellow, they are mostly mucus, meaning they are very slimy. And if you, by the way, have dentures, they are the ones that kind of get the under suction to keep them in place. You have salivary glands at the tip of your tongue, surrounding the lip, on the back of your tongue. And all of these work together to hydrate the oral mucosa, to help with the first digestion of food, and to protect your teeth and to keep a balanced pH. So saliva is derived from blood, which has a very controlled pH from 7.35 to 7.45. Saliva can vary much more. the fluid and the electrolytes, and as we said, 25% of the proteins are the same as in blood. So the fluid and the electrolytes and some of the proteins are transported out from the capillary bed to the surrounding tissue and then taken up by the gland, by the cells in the salivary gland. So you would think that you secrete the same amount of saliva every day or at every time of the day, but you don't. So if you look here at my red arrow, it's basically at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's the height. So in the early, late afternoon, that's when we secrete the most. And that's also when our blood pressure is the highest and when we are usually most active. When we sleep, we secrete less. And this is milliliter per minute. And this is the unstimulated whole saliva. So you can see it's not a whole lot. It's not even a milliliter. So the salivary secretion is tied to the circadian rhythm, like the light and darkness. And as you can see here, and as I said before, it's right here, right before 6 o'clock or 1800 hours that we are the most active, we have the most muscle strength, and we also have the most saliva secretion. So since I said that I take saliva samples from my patients, so why in the world would I want to do that? Well, I'm not going to open a saliva restaurant and bar, that's for sure. But it might be that I see many small lesions in the enamel or dentin that I don't need to restore yet. But I wonder, why did they come there? Is there anything we can do in terms of preventive care that would prevent them from enlarge? I can also see erosions on the teeth, on the enamel, I mean, or on the root surface. So I wonder is the pH correct? Because in the plasma is so controlled, but since I told you we have so much of bacteria in the oral cavity, and those bacteria, they secrete acid. So I wonder if at least we could know what the pH would be of saliva. I can also see decay or caries at the gum line, right where the enamel of the tooth ends. And the dentin is more susceptible to break down. It contains much less of mineral and more of the collagen part. It's just 70% mineral if you compare it to enamel, which is like 97. So it's much more susceptible if you have lesions there. So I would like to know why. Also, if my patient's teeth are really sensitive, which might mean that my patients are drinking more fermented or kombucha or coffee, black coffee, or other really acidic drinks. And I had once a patient that I could hardly touch their teeth. And then all of a sudden, it came to my mind that I need to ask them if they like lemons. And of course, that patient loved to eat lemons and suck on lemons, and to the point where her teeth started to be so sensitive because the nerve endings, they were irritated every time she was eating something acidic. If I also know that my patient has GERD, and even if they are taking medications, I have seen that the buffer capacity is not enough, and that's a good thing to know. So we can make informed decisions like how we eat, what we eat, when we eat. I have patients that have been diagnosed with dry mouth syndrome, Sjögren's syndrome, or lupus, or burning mouth, and also in graft versus host disease, where your saliva secretion is changed. And also if you have received radiation towards the oral cavity or chemo in general, it's good to know your saliva secretion, because usually you can see that you get more tooth decay. Another time I might want to do a saliva test is if I see a patient that the patient tongue doesn't look like it's keratinized like it usually is. Usually you have a gray hue or like a grayish tone at the top of your tongue. And if it is instead more raspberry, like more red and shiny, then I know that you probably don't have enough saliva. And I can also see that there is some plaque at the gum line. So I know that the cleaning effect that saliva usually gives might be missing. And then are the patient that says that your mouth feels so dry all the time. Dry as a desert, right? So this is what the dry mouth could look like. And this is this raspberry red-like tongue, and you can see it has lost its keratinization and the lips are cracked. And here you can see what happens. These dark spots here, you get decay at the gum line. And it's great to know even before this stage happens, because you want to catch this really early on. So it doesn't need to be this extreme. If you think you have a dry mouth, meaning lack of saliva or oral dryness, these are some signs. Many times I ask patients if they have a dry mouth, and they usually say no. And then I ask them, well, do you drink a lot of water? Yeah, they say, I sip water all the time. So when you need to sip liquids in order to swallow food, you probably have even if you don't have real xerostomia, you might have enough of oral dryness so it affects your teeth. If your mouth feels dry when you eat a meal, if you need to go up at night to drink, and if you need to suck on sweets or you find that very pleasant, then it's probably you have a dry mouth. If you have difficulty swallowing certain foods, and if you eat crackers and you need to drink in order to swallow, you might have a dry mouth. And also if your eyes feel dry, like in Sjögren's syndrome, it's both the eyes and the glands that are affected, the salivary glands, I mean. And the skin, inside of nose, lips, eyes, they're all together. If you feel that kind of dryness, it would be great to just test your saliva. Many times it is the medications that we take. And I'm not going into the signaling of the salivary gland here, but you can see the different receptors. And instead of learning everything by heart, we usually say that if you take more than 4 medications or 4+ medications, it will affect the signaling within your salivary glands. And hypertensive medications and antidepressants, they might be the worst. Also, I see a lot of more dry mouth patients or dry mouth that are females. So what happens after menopause when our estrogen levels drop is that the sex hormones are almost exclusively secreted by the adrenal gland. For males, it is not like that. They still have the testosterone and in combination with the DHEA. And the salivary glands are very dependent upon sex steroid in order to transport water out of the cell. So this is why we see so many more females that are affected by Sjögren's, by lupus, but also by dry mouth in general. I see that there is a question in the chat. Is this something that I should answer now before I go into how we do the testing?
Oh, no, there's no question. I was just reminding folks that they can ask questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I actually do chairside saliva testing, and it's much more simple than the liquid biopsies, but it tells you a lot and it helps you with your regular care. So just to simplify things, we use a commercial kit where you can test for quality, meaning how much you secrete per minute, the pH, and also the buffering capacity. And I have started to do this more as a part of my restorative treatment of older patients, but we do it in the student clinic and I do it in the faculty practice. And when I give CDE courses for dentists, I try to encourage them to do the same. The reason for this, and I haven't told you that yet, the reason for this is that enamel, I told you that it contains 97% mineral, but it dissolves at a very low pH, around 5.2 to 5.5, we say is like the critical range. But cementum, meaning the outer layer of the root surface, it dissolves at a much higher pH, like 6.1 to 6.5. And that is the real enemy for us, because most of the foods that we eat, they are more acidic. Even drinking black coffee or carbonated water has a pH of 5.5. And when you sit here and if you take medications, your resting saliva might be lower than 6.1 or 6.5. So that means that your root surfaces, once they are exposed to the oral environment, they can actually start to lose their mineral and dissolve like naturally throughout the day. So that's when it becomes so important, like what you eat and the pH of your foods. So I look at hydration. You know, we are supposed to drink about like 2 liters per day, which will be like 64 ounces or more of water per day to stay hydrated. And then I look at the stimulated and unstimulated secretion. I measure it, I weigh it, I see how many milliliter or gram per minute we secrete. Then I measure the pH, and then for the stimulated secretion, I measure the buffer capacity. So I wanted to show you 2 examples of patients, and we can call them Stanley and Pam. So here they are. Here are the x-rays, and you might not be that used to looking at x-rays as I am, but here are at the errors. You can see that there are darker areas, and this is tooth decay. This is where we are losing minerals, so the x-rays can go through the tooth and darken the film. So you can see here that for Pam, or we can call her Pam, she has lots of these decays right underneath where the enamel ends. And that means right where her root surface is. If we go to Stanley, we can see about the same phenomenon. He has right where his restorations ends. That's where you can see the shadows. So for both of these patients, I test their hydration, their unstimulated saliva, and the stimulated saliva. And the way I do it is that, so this is my saliva. You sit in a chair for the unstimulated saliva, and you kind of just drool into a cup and for 5 minutes. Then I weigh it, and 1 gram equals 1 milliliter. So it's a better accuracy to weigh a sample than to try to measure how much in a medicine cup. So which means that I will show you, you can actually do this at home yourself. So then I can calculate my flow, and my resting saliva was 0.7. And I can take the pH, and you see here, my pH is probably 6.8, which means that I'm not dissolving my root surfaces by my saliva or fluid alone. Then if I go to the stimulated, the kit has a bit of a paraffin wax that you chew on, You could chew on something like a clean, like rubber band or something that doesn't taste anything. And then you collect your saliva, you weigh it the same way, just subtract the weight of the cup you use, and then you look at the pH and see here, as soon as I start to chew, I use a different set of salivary glands. I use mostly the parotid gland, and it has a much higher buffering capacity than the ones that we have down here. That's the submandibular and sublingual glands. So remember this, because this is part of my solution for many of the patients. And then I also measure the buffer capacity. And you can see this stick here with 3 green squares. And this means that my saliva was able to neutralize the dried acids that the company had put on that stick. For GERD patients, and this is a patient that actually was on medications. Even if this patient was taking medications, her buffer capacity or her saliva was not able to neutralize those acids. And this, I think, was a wake-up call, both for me and for the patients, that even if you are taking medications, the saliva that is in your in your oral cavity and surrounding your teeth might not be able to neutralize the acidic foods that you are eating. So the acidity of the foods might damage your teeth, even though you think that you are safe by taking medications. So here I did this for Stanley, and I did the same test for Pam. And the hydration for Stanley was low, and I measured the hydration by just turning the lip inside out, wiping it, and then just seeing if it takes more or less than 60 seconds for the mucosa to be hydrated or rehydrated. And if so, Stanley wasn't hydrated enough, but all his other values were extremely great. No, he had a normal flow. He had very healthy pH, just like mine. He had a lot of saliva when we measured the stimulated secretion. He had a very healthy pH, and he had great buffer capacity. So I was at a loss. I did not understand why he had so much decay. So what do you think? At least if I didn't find anything wrong with his saliva, eventually it took maybe a month or two, or even longer, then he finally told us that he loved to eat very simple carbs. And this is not Stanley, but this is just to picture and to see that the physical consistency of food is really important, because they are retained in our mouth. If we don't brush enough, and you can see the gingivitis here, the redness of the gingiva, and liquids, they are cleared rapidly, but sticky foods, biscuits, even pasta, sticky rice, and potato chips, they stick along. So for Stanley, he needed to change his diet if he wanted to keep his teeth, because he had so much decay and so many older restorations, so he needed several crowns. If we instead go to Pam, she also had a low hydration. So both of these patients, they did not hydrate enough. For Pam, I could see that she was really suffering with oral dryness. So she's female after menopause, and both of these patients were taking 7+ medications each. It didn't affect Stanley, but it did affect Pam. And you can see here that her saliva is moderately acidic. And you also see that that is in the range of where she would just naturally dissolve her root surfaces that are exposed to the oral cavity. If we go to the stimulated saliva, you also see that she had very little stimulated saliva. We missed to see what her pH was. My guess is that it was healthy, and her buffer capacity was normal. So it was a different explanation for Pam than it was for Stanley. So we need to do much more for Pam to change her, to kind of change the trajectory that she is in. Because with these deep cavities, she would need root canals, crowns, and you know that Medicaid doesn't cover this. So what I work with, I have a 9-page chart with different pH of foods. And here you just see the A and the B version, but it's 9 pages. And to intentionally eat foods that are not too acidic, if that is part of why you get decay or why your teeth get sensitive. Also, water can be acidic, and the tap water in Seattle is excellent. It supposedly has a pH of 8.2 from the water source. That's what they aim at. So if you instead drink like carbonated water, it naturally has a pH of at least 5.5 or lower. Or fitness water is terrible for your teeth. So if you drink that throughout a day, you might overwhelm the buffering capacity of your saliva. We have 3 different buffer systems, and many of those work at both the bicarbonate and the phosphate buffer system work at a lower pH, but they can also get overwhelmed if you throughout the day drink water that has a pH of around 3. So what I have been finding for my high-risk caries patients is that they usually have a low unstimulated salivary flow and a low pH. So how do you change that? Well, you can start by strengthening the enamel and the cementum by just using prescription toothpaste. There are varnishes that you can paint on. There is silver diamine fluoride, and they have different values of the ppm. So regular prescription toothpaste is 5,000 ppm. SDF is 55,000. So that will be incorporated into the enamel and into the dentin, and it will harden the surface so that it takes more acidic saliva to demineralize the surface. You can also, if you don't have enough of saliva, you can use calcium-containing toothpaste to compensate for loss of saliva or for low hydration. You can drink water just to lubricate the oral mucosa. There are not very good artificial salivas on the market. They are mostly water with xylitol that is pH controlled to around 7. So it's actually better instead to chew gum so that you get more of your own saliva. Because if you remember, you had much more saliva when you were chewing things. You just need to see that what you're chewing is beneficial. So if you instead chew gum that contains xylitol, which is a sugar alcohol that bacteria cannot use, that's really beneficial, especially for root surface caries. If you have very low buffer capacity, you can alkalinize the water with baking soda. So after you had been eating something that is acidic, just put a teaspoon of baking soda in a glass of warm water, and then swish it around, spit out, because that should give you a pH of around 9, and that will neutralize the acidity right away. I was actually checking that. I was drinking coffee with milk, and I got my saliva pH down to 6.2, but after it's rinsing with water, it was up to 7.2 right away. So just by rinsing with something helps. You can also brush with baking soda containing toothpaste, and baking soda has a pH of 9. Arm & Hammer has some of that in, I think all of the toothpaste actually has a baking soda and also fluoride. Trader Joe's baking soda toothpaste does not contain fluoride, so try to avoid that if you also want to strengthen your enamel. Then, of course, you can change your diet to foods with a more neutral pH. And you can also change your diet to foods that are more raw, that require more chewing. Because when you are chewing more raw food and your teeth are kind of jumping up and down in the sockets in the bone, that's where the nerve endings are that will stimulate saliva secretion. So then you will get much more saliva. And your dentist could also prescribe an antimicrobial rinse like chlorhexidine, just to remove the bacteria. Because it is the bacteria, okay, not only what we eat, but it also the growth of the bacteria in our mouth and the acidity that they secrete when they use sugar as a food source. So the reason we can have acidic saliva or acidic environment in the oral cavity is because we have a growth of bacteria that secretes acid. And they usually, in our case, secrete lactic acid. The bacteria that is more talked about regarding caries is Streptococcus mutans, and it has learned to survive in really acidic environments. So I wanted to show you some oral health products that are useful and that I have chosen to work with because they are easily accessible, and of course, Amazon, Seattle-based. And during COVID, everything, I think everyone bought things from Amazon. But xylitol gum, and xylitol is the sugar alcohol that bacteria cannot use. My favorite would be Icebreakers ice cubes, just because they are easily accessible. You can buy them anywhere and they are not expensive. If you want to taste good candy that is by xylitol, I have bought this from Amazon, and I try to get my older patients not to eat sugar candy. So of course I buy the taste that they would love, like butterscotch, licorice, maybe peppermint. And then to change your diet, doesn't this look really good? So these are beets. And also psyllium melts. Psyllium melts are discs. Of course, they contain xylitol, but you can place them on your teeth or on the inside of your mouth. And while you are sleeping, you actually start to drool just by having something placed there. So it's a very beneficial dry mouth agent if you get a dry mouth overnight. Other products that are great, there are prescription toothpaste for sensitive teeth. They contain 5% potassium nitrate. That helps to desensitize your teeth. It works for many And there are also prescription toothpaste for dry mouth that contains extra calcium, or they don't contain the foaming agent that might irritate the mucosa. There is the toothpaste for sensitive teeth. So if you drink a lot of acidic drinks, I would say wine, hard cider, kombucha, everything that is fermented, lemon, fruits are acidic. So if you eat fruits throughout the day, your teeth might be sensitive and your saliva might not be enough to buffer it back to a neutral pH. So in Europe, in Canada, in India, toothpaste is considered as cosmetics. And in the US here, it's FDA controlled. So there are very different products that is available depending on the country that you are working or living in. So Sensodyne has a product with a calcium phosphosilicate that blocks the tubules where the nerve endings are in the teeth, and it's called Novamin. Of course, it's not sold in the US. There is sold something that looks the same. It's called Sensodyne Repair and Protect. The one that contains the phosphosilicate is, it says powered by Novamin, and you can buy it on Amazon. For my patients with really sensitive teeth, this is the one that has helped them the most. And also, of course, to be more intentional with what you eat or drink. So that's the first thing, but just to get rid of the sensitivity. So what you are doing when you are drinking or eating acidic foods is that you are alerting the nerve endings within the dental tubules so that they are on high alert, and they cannot feel touch, right? But they can feel pain. So with anything that happens with the tooth, it answers with pain. Another product that has come on the market, I think fairly recently, is just this alkaline water drops. So if you want to increase the pH of what you are drinking, use those. If you want to measure saliva yourself at home, you can do that. You don't need much. And Amazon, of course, is your best friend. So you need a food scale. It doesn't need to have a TAR function, but just so it can measure like in grams. And then you need a pH paper. And both of these I bought them from Amazon. They are $10 each. And the pH paper needs to be a pH range from 5.5 or lower up to 8. And this is the one that I tried several ones, and this was the one that mostly resembles what I had in my saliva kit. And then you can look at your own hydration, you can look at your flow, and you can look at the pH and see if you want to make any changes. And then you can challenge your dentist and say, oh, I know my saliva is acidic. Why haven't you said anything? So if you want to come to see us at faculty practice, if you're in between dentists or if you work at UW, here we are located at Mount Lake in the Health Science Building, D Wing, D453, and we are a team of 5 dentists. And here is our contact information. If we go back to the dentist, we are general dentists and prosthodontists, and we also work with the GPR and ADD program that does sedations. So we basically cover everything. We work with orthodontists, with endo, so the whole school of dentistry can basically serve all of your needs. Okay, I hope you have questions.
Yes. So a question that has come through is, I heard green tea is good for tea, or sorry, I heard green tea is good for teeth and we can drink it and sleep without brushing teeth. Are we supposed, I'm sorry, my cat is very vocal right now. Belle is here. Are we supposed to rinse with water after drinking green tea, which does not contain sugar?
You can do, so tea also naturally contains fluoride. So green tea is an antioxidant. So green tea is okay. You don't need to rinse your teeth after that. Except if you put honey in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question is antiseptic mouthwash that helps eliminate 99.9% of germs hurts my mouth badly. Is that normal?
It is because it contains alcohol, and they might have flavored it to minty. So I would brush my teeth more. I've actually had patients that was working as a pastor, and she was rinsing her mouth with this type of mouthwash like all the time, and her oral mucosa started to kind of peel off. And that was because those mouthwash contains alcohol and it's too rough. You can do warm salt water rinses, or you can rinse like once a day, maybe, or dilute it. The most important thing is that you brush and floss.
Wonderful. And I have a follow-up question for mouthwash and a follow-up about tea. On mouthwash, which do you recommend? Antiseptic mouthwash that can help eliminate the 99.9% of germs, or regular mouthwash, and why?
I personally actually don't use mouthwash. And if you want to use it to get rid of like a taste, I would actually, this might sound gross, I will brush my teeth and my tongue to just eliminate the bacteria. If I see that patients need mouthwash to eliminate bacteria because they have too much plaque and they are making changes, I write a prescription mouthwash that is 0.12% chlorhexidine, and that eliminates most of the bacteria. I wouldn't use these hard mouthwashes that makes your mouth feel too dry and that hurts. Warm salt water rinses, salt, although it needs to be in a bit of a high concentration, also eliminates growth of bacteria. The best to do is actually brush more. If you brush 2 to 3 times per day, you should be good.
Thank you. Is it okay to drink herbal teas after I brush?
I would say check the pH. So herbal teas can be really acidic. Water is not acidic, so the tap water in Seattle should be around 8, at least around 7. So it should be fine, but I would check it. Because if you ask me, like for orange juice that has a pH of like 3 or even less, and it contains sugar, so that you shouldn't drink after you brush your teeth. Herbal tea, you need to check that pH.
Thank you. That's really helpful for myself included, as someone who likes to brush my teeth and then have like chamomile tea or bedtime tea right before bed. And I'm always like, oh, maybe I should get up and rinse my mouth, but I get so relaxed. That's part of my nighttime routine. Someone has asked, what toothpaste do you use?
Haha.
Yes.
That's funny. I actually use the Colgate whitening toothpaste, the strongest you can find at Costco. But I do that because I drink coffee. I drink coffee and tea, so I get so much of stain. But when I came to the US, I've been in the US since 2002. I was just buying the cheapest toothpaste on the market, because they are actually all the same. They contain the same amount of fluoride. They have some good taste, like some good flavor, some consistency giver, but there isn't much more to a toothpaste unless you start to get more stain or you start to get sensitive teeth. Then toothpaste with potassium nitrate. But most toothpaste are the same. So in the whitening toothpaste that I'm using, that can also make your teeth actually sensitive. So you should be aware of that. It contains hydrogen peroxide. So you could actually brush with hydrogen peroxide also alone. It foams a bit, so it isn't as pleasant. But you could use any toothpaste. You could also brush with salt. And in many cultures, they do that. Just brush with salt alone. It's just that it might not be as that tasty.
Wow, it's really,
yeah.
I've never heard that before. So many gems today. Another question has come in. What would you recommend to a patient with GERD to help protect their teeth?
Yes, I would. If you have my email address, or it's just sjeffrey, I can send you my pH chart. I would be careful with what I am drinking and eating. And I would also see, it depends on if you are on medication or not, but you should have your saliva tested so you see if you are able, when you're on medication, to neutralize. Since I'm using that buffer capacity stick with the dried acids, we can see which acids you are able to neutralize, or which ones might be outside of your range. But you should be really careful. The best would be to actually test your saliva and just get facts and see where you are.
Okay, great. And Suzanne, would you rather for that pH chart, can you also send that to us over at the Whole U, and we can send that out to folks that attend today?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, wonderful. A couple more questions here. Coconut oil swishing for 10 to 20 minutes is said to be cleaning and disinfecting the mouth. Is that good?
Actually, sometimes I need to say, I don't know.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, I actually don't know. I must go and read up on that on PubMed. I haven't heard anything. The cleaning effect is usually because of the fluid that you can swish around. If it is oil, it might coat your teeth to protect them from bacteria to attach. That's just my thinking, but I haven't read anything. So for that one, I don't know.
I appreciate that. I don't know. Sometimes that is our answer sometimes. And that's okay. Can you speak to, is it bad to brush your teeth after eating? I read somewhere you should wait a half hour before brushing.
That's usually what we recommend. And the reason is that it takes your saliva 30 minutes to buffer back your pH from the pH of the food that you ate to the neutral level where it usually is. So if you brush before the saliva has buffered the pH in your mouth back, you might wear down your enamel and your dentin more. So you should wait.
Thank you so much. And can you put the pH chart back onto the screen again by chance?
Yeah, this was just the first page. Yes, I can. So, and I started to be interested in this actually because I gave a talk at the School of Nursing, and one nurse was asking me, well, what is a good diet for teeth? And I was actually speechless at that time. Now I know better. So here is the pH chart, but it is 9 pages. So it goes from A to Z, right?
Yes, wonderful. And we'll look forward to receiving that, and we can send that out with the recording. I don't see any other questions in the chat box, but we'll give it a couple of moments here, just in case someone has any final thoughts or questions. All right, I'm not seeing anything come up, so I will close it out. And thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining us today and sharing so much great insight. I know I learned quite a bit, especially about the most important things I should be doing for my oral health, which I am not doing currently. Appreciate you so much. And folks, thank you for your great participation and great questions. I'm going to stop recording here and wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care.